everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are going to be talking about the storyline of a scene, or how you can use a template to figure out how to structure your play. So this was inspired by a question I received during one of my Patreon live streams, and in that somebody was wondering if there was a template or a set format or something else like that that they could use to figure out how to set up their scenes. They were newer and they were feeling kind of lost. They weren't really sure how to actually add structure into their play and how to make that work. Now, the short answer to that question is there's not really anything that is truly one size fits all. There is simply so many different types of play, different combinations of play, role play scenarios, different types of equipment you can use, different durations of scenes. There's just so much that you can change to really suit the individual people in that scene space that there's not really anything that is going to work for every BDSM scenario. The human element will change things. It will always cause deviation no matter how much you try and plan every single little element out. There will always be that variability. That being said, there is one method in particular that I think might be helpful for newer people who are trying to figure out how to add structure into their play and kind of know how things might be able to flow together. And that is what I would like to call the story arc method. I have literally just made that name up. I don't know anybody else who calls it that, but this methodology has been something that I have seen echoed in numerous BDSM classes where people are talking about scene composition and structure. And this is really just a basic way of thinking about how BDSM scenes work. Because even if they don't have role play involved in them, BDSM scenes at the end of the day are almost sort of like a narrative experience that two people are creating with each other. And so like a story, that means that they have a beginning, a middle, and an end. The play has to begin at some point and it has to stop at some point. So that is what I'm going to be talking about today, how you can think about and structure all of these things, and let's go ahead and get into it. So the first part is what I would call the introduction. I am kind of cheating here a little bit because I am not really starting off with the first proper act of a scene. This is what comes beforehand. So like how a story doesn't always start with action on the very first page, neither does a BDSM scene. So how an introduction functions in BDSM is usually this is the negotiation period. This is where you're working up to the scene itself, talking about the goals and purposes for the play, outlining kind of what's going to be going on, all of that good stuff. So actually, the very first step to a BDSM scene isn't when the flogger first hits the skin. It is when you are going and actually talking to people about what's going to be happening beforehand, before anything ends up happening at all. So that is always important to keep in mind, and if you have more questions about negotiation, link to some related videos will be down below. Alright, so now we are on to Act 1, which is the actual beginning of the scene itself. Like every story has a beginning, so does BDSM. It's not like we're doing this constantly for forever, so every single scene has to have a beginning. Everybody handles this differently depending on what scene you are doing. Some people have a very long, slow introduction. Other people have a very quick introduction. Some people don't even really have this at all. They just kind of jump right into the very heaviest part of the play. But no matter what, there's always going to be something of a beginning. Now, as a top especially, it can be kind of tricky to figure out how you actually start the scene. And what I would always remember is it's important before you get into the play to make sure that people's minds and bodies are in the proper headspace, that they're ready to go in whatever sort of direction you're going to be leading them down. And there's a couple of different ways to do that. So, for example, if you are in a play space together and you are getting ready to do a scene, but your partner isn't yet in the position you want them to be in, having a gentle reminder of can you get on the cross now? If you're ready, please sit down now. Something like that to instruct them to get into the right position will help them, especially if they are more a submissive person or somebody who's a bottom but maybe still enjoys kind of the compliance sort of thing. Just reminding them of the fact that you are the one in control now at the top, that you're going to be the one directing the scene, and also just having a little bit of a moment of human connection. If they are already in the position that they need to be into for the play that you're doing, just having a little bit of a simple verbal reminder, a little check-in. Hey, you ready to get going? How are you feeling today? Just something, again, having a little bit of a human moment. If you're doing something that is more bondage related, you can do these things as well, but some things that I know I have enjoyed is having the rope kind of touch and caress the skin before anything's actually tied on. Just getting used to that sensation of having the rope on the body without necessarily having to have any bondage quite happen yet. If you are doing something that is a little bit more power exchange focused, something that's very classic to do is to hold out the toy that you're going to be playing with, or one of the toys that you're going to be playing with, and instruct your partner to kiss it in thanks. You can also do this at the end of the scene, or if you're using the hands, you can also have them kiss your knuckles or kiss your hand as well, although obviously kissing can be quite intimate for some people, so don't spring this on anybody. Please make sure you bring it up during negotiation beforehand. If you are doing something that is more role play focused, just a little simple verbal reminder of what the person's role is can do a lot to help them get more into that headspace. So it marks the transition between just normal, everyday human to human interaction and whatever you're going to be doing for the role play scenario. So for somebody who is a kitten player, telling them that they are a good kitten. For somebody who is in a CGL dynamic, reminding them that they are a good girl or a good boy or a sweet little one, or whatever title you want to use. Just a little simple verbal affirmation to kind of clarify, okay, this is what you are now. Here's the role play state that you're going to be in for the scene that you're having. Now, the next step after this, once you have sort of introduced everything, once you have started to go down the path of establishing the headspace of the scene, is to go into the warm-up phase. Now, the warm-up phase is mostly associated with impact or pain-focused play, because you obviously need to warm up the body a little bit before you get into the intense sensations. But this also can very much apply to other forms of play as well. If you're playing with humiliation, for example, you don't normally start off with the worst, the heaviest insults. You work up to that. You kind of give yourself and your partner some time to develop into that headspace, to connect emotionally before you get into the very intense things. That might mean that you go more softly, more slowly. That might mean you check in more, or you take longer pauses. Just some sort of way of easing into the sensation, be that physical or mental, whatever feels right for the type of scene that you're having. Now, this doesn't mean that everybody has to have a warm-up for every single type of scene. Just as a note, there are some techniques such as cold caning where no warm-up is used on purpose, because that is actually the sensation that the people involved want to achieve. However, if you are not sure if you should include a warm-up or not, and if you haven't explicitly negotiated to not include it, I would always recommend that you do go ahead and include a warm-up, because it gives everybody time to really start to develop in the scene, start to feel their energy, start to just get in touch with everything again before you get into that more intense play. Now we are on to Act 2, which is the middle of the scene. So this is where the bulk of the play takes place. This is where the meat of the scene is at. And this really consists of the latter half of the rising action, so the warm-up phase that I was talking about earlier, the bulk of the play itself, and then also the climax. Sometimes that climax is very literal, sometimes it's not, sometimes it just means that that is the peak of whatever play you are doing, but the second act, this middle part of the scene, is where the bulk of the play is going to take place. This might mean that you're transitioning out of the warm-up phase into the more intense type of play. Maybe that means you're going faster, going harder, using a different implement. Maybe that means if you're doing a bondage focus scene, that means that you're finishing the tie. Maybe you're transitioning into a suspension. If you're doing something role play related, maybe you're getting very deep into the headspace that you're engaging in. But whatever it is, you're kind of getting into more whatever the purpose of the scene was. This is where all of that is occurring in. This can also be a moment element where you add in additional elements of play. So maybe you start out during the warm-up as just doing impact play. Then when you get into it, maybe you add in more role play elements, more humiliation elements, add in a completely different sensation. Maybe you do some sensory deprivation. You just add in some other elements that weren't there before. And now the duration for this part of play can vary widely. Maybe you only have 20 minutes to do a scene and the middle part of the scene is only 7 minutes of that. Maybe you have as much time in the world as you want and this part of it is 2 hours. It really depends. It also depends on what your goals are for the scene. Do you want to reach subspace? Are you doing a service scene with a specific task? Are you trying to take a specific amount of pain? Are you doing something else that's goal oriented? Is it just about achieving an orgasm? There are so many different things that can determine when the actual peak of play takes place, but suffice to say, at some point in time along here, there will be a moment where the play is the most intense, be that physically, emotionally, mentally, or otherwise. There will be something in there that is as tough, as emotional, as something else. Just the peak of the play will happen at some point during this part of the scene. And then after that, obviously, once you have reached the peak of the scene, you can kind of stay in that peak area for a while. It might be just one quick instantaneous moment. It might be something you linger on. It might be 5, 10, 20 minutes of the scene, but somewhere there's going to be a peak, there's going to be a shelf where it's not going to get more intense than that. And that is when you start transitioning into Act 3, which is the end of the scene. Now, when you are doing play, obviously, when somebody has an orgasm or when something else is going on, whenever you have achieved what you wanted to achieve, it's not like you just go, all right, pack it up, boys, we've achieved what we wanted to do, let us end the scene. You do not just quit a scene cold turkey. You just don't go like, okay, we're done here. All right, take you down off the cross. All right, see you next week. Like, you don't just end it right away. There's always going to be a transition period, or at least there should be. Some people end their scenes really abruptly, but again, if you're not sure, it is always a good idea to include not just a warm-up period, but also a cool-down period as well. Particularly if you have had a very long scene, if you've been playing very intensely or with something new. There's a lot of things going on in the brain. There's a lot of chemicals going on. There's a lot of feelings, emotions to process. And so if you were to just suddenly go like, all right, the scene's over, that's going to be a very jarring experience for a lot of people. It can ruin the headspace that they're in. It can make them feel confused and lost. Generally not a super great thing to do. So what you need to do instead is slowly ramp the scene back down. Now, I do have an entire video coming out where I'm going to be talking about just how to end the scene, so I'm not going to get into too much detail here, but suffice to say, there's also going to be a cool down period. You're going to slowly ramp down the play, help give verbal reminders to your partner that the scene's going to be ending soon, give them a something that they can kind of hold on to kind of lower themselves back down off of the subspace ladder if that is something that you were working towards during the scene, or if they went there anyways. Just something to help them slowly get grounded and slowly start to come back into reality so they can exit the play in a way that's going to be as safe and as mentally and emotionally secure as possible. Now, this is not to say that it only has to follow this very super linear pattern where it's beginning, middle, end, and then you stay ended. If you are doing a little bit more of a complex scene, if you have a little bit more time to play with, you can actually go through this in different orders and different numbers of times. So maybe you start to warm up and you get towards the middle, but then you come back down, and you start to go up again, you come back down, or maybe you go through one peak, one climax, and then you start to, cool down, and then you warm up again, and you do it again, and then so on and so forth. Like, there's all different ways and combinations you can start to modify this if you are interested in getting into more advanced play, longer play, playing with multiple elements. There are certainly ways to do that if you want to modify this otherwise very 1, 2, 3 sort of structure. All right, now we are on to the 5th part of this. I have not done a great job of numbering this because there was the first step, which was the introduction, but then there was acts 1, 2, and 3, and this is actually part 5. I I'm sorry, this is not a great numbering job on my part, but part 5, the very, very end of everything here, is the afterword. So once play ends, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything is immediately cut off and it's done. Usually after the play of a scene is ended, people will transition into something known as aftercare. And this is, again, more of the grounding. This is where you kind of bring yourself and your partner back down into reality. You debrief, you talked about what happened, you just have a moment to catch your breath, get some water, do something. Aftercare can look like a lot of different things. Some people need aftercare right away after a scene. Some people need it 2, 3, 4 days later. Some people don't need it until a month later. You know, there's all sorts of variability with aftercare, but it's just another kind of security to help people come back into reality in a safe and complete way. And as well, if you are wondering about different aftercare methods, if you're wondering how to make aftercare work for you, lots of videos will be down in the description box below for that. That is kind of it for this format. As you can see, it's a very, very basic structure, but you can play with it, you can add onto it. Again, this is not meant to be a one-size-fits-all type of thing. It is about what works for you, what works for your partner, so feel free to modify anything in here that I have said. This is just simply one example among many of how you might be able to structure a scene for yourself if you're not really sure on where to get started. The biggest part of any scene is obviously the human element. Once again, it is the human element. Different people have different needs and wants. Different scenes just evolve organically in different ways. And what is important to remember here amongst all of this is to be able to be flexible. No matter how much you plan things down to the very second of every single scene, things just happen. People happen. It is as much about knowing the general format of how a scene can go as much as it is about knowing organically how to transition between these different moments. How do you know when to start going into the warm-up? How do you know when somebody's ready to come back down from subspace? So it is as much about being able to read people, in-scene communication, body language, just intuition in general, to really know when certain things should transition from, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, so on and so forth. So it is by no means just cut and dry, 1, 2, 3, here's what you do. You also have to make sure that you do have some of those in-scene skills, have some of those intuition-based skills. It's not all just, again, 1, 2, 3, cut and dry. You have to have some of those other skills built up as well. Anyways, that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover today. Hopefully this was interesting and helpful for you. If you have any comments or questions, you can leave that down in the comment section below. Do you have any particular ways that you enjoy formatting a scene? I would be very interested to know if you have any methods that you enjoy going to. If you like this video, if you want to see more from me, you can subscribe to this channel and make videos twice a week about all things BDSM and alternative relationships. If you really like this video, if you want to support my channel, the best way you can do that is over on Patreon. I make videos over there that are exclusive just for Patreon. I also have extra photo shoots, a Discord chat, lots of fun things. So if you haven't already, please check it out. Link will be down in the description box below. If you do already support me over there, thank you so, so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.